Hello, you. If you don't mind, I'm going to take you guys on another trip back to the past, only this time 1 year forward in the era of 2020. As I scoured the internet hot off of Ozark's shocking Season 3 cliffhanger looking for something new to tie me by, my search ended when my siblings recommended that I watch a show called You, a psychological thriller about a bookstore clerk that has more to tell under the textbook loverboy mask he dons. So I gave it a watch, and honestly I was hooked. Which was surprising to me because the CW man himself, Greg Berlanti, had a hand in this. To tell you the truth, I was stumped. Joe is an interesting character to follow, the surrounding cast added more spice to the stew despite their over-exaggeration at times, the plot itself was simple and straightforward. It's not the smartest thing ever written, but you don't have to turn your brain off either. It was a fun, entertaining way of showing how deceiving people, even the protagonist himself, can be. I consider it the best of the series, although Season 2 is not far behind. Season 3, however, is where it all started to feel like they were running out of ideas. Am I gonna break down how terrible it is? How many days do you have? Let me just say that I drew the line when Love woohooed a college student fresh out of high school because, get this, he reminds her of her brother.
I mean, I get it though. That kid is pretty cool. Kinda reminds me of me.
To the season's credit though, at least the ending wasn't bad. Sure, it doesn't deserve praise for doing the last 2% of the work right, but by the way it was looking, I thought this was the show's last season. Joe got off scot-free, but at the cost of his soulmate, his child, and Marienne. He didn't lose, but he didn't exactly win either. I'll give it a pass, as long as nothing else continues ruining the show. I would have preferred that he got arrested, but to be real, I wanted to get away from the show as fast as possible. Of course they did.
Fuck this. Fuck whoever made these little fucking bags. Which fucking end is it? Fuck this. Fuck this. Fuck my life.
At this point, I was like, what could they possibly make this story about now? What? Is he just gonna kill his way to Marienne like he's been doing for 3 seasons? Oh, he's gonna be a teacher surrounded by rich people in a whodunit.
What?
Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not one of those people who hate watch something just to see how far down the path of terabad it can go. As fun as that is, I stopped doing it because most companies bank on that nowadays. But this was a particular event that I just had to take part in. I mean, I've gotten this far, might as well give it one more shot, you know? Despite the amount of splaining they have to do in order for this season to have a reason to exist, I have a burning feeling that these writers can pull through and bring about a season for the ages.
You listen once, you sanctimonious. I cannot understand why you are here. You are a hollow nobody with no life of his own. Good night. Fuck me.
It's so bad and dumb. It's overstuffed yet drawn out, the characters are insufferable, the plot is completely devoid of all logic, previously established traits in both Joe and the world around him get selectively retconned, nuance and undertone are now in the trunk rather than the backseat they took in the season before. There's not much good to say about this season at all. I'm still struggling to come up with the things it did right outside of good performances, I think? If Season 3 wasn't a clear sign that this show needed to end, then Season 4 has to be it. As for the consensus with the general public, it's polarizing to say the least. Some people say it's the best thing they've seen all series, and others hate its guts because of the reasons I've mentioned before. I just need you to know that if you like this season, I have no quarrel with you. This is just me fortifying my claim for why it's god-awful. Feel free to comment on my points and arguments, because I'm curious to find out what people see in it that I don't. It'll be interesting to compare notes. I know it's weird that I'm not touching on gaming, as the last time I dove into a show was Bel Air back at the beginning of 2022, but this has been a show that I've been meaning to talk about for a long while, and I finally found the words to voice my thoughts. So please bear with me. I apologize for being absent in the past months. I've been hard at work on the script and editing for this series, and I wanted to make sure that I came back swinging. Hopefully this is indicative of that, and I hope you enjoy. Here is my review of You, Season 4. The first episode takes place in the city of London. The first episode takes place in the city of... I'm sorry, wasn't like the whole setup of last season's ending supposed to be him searching for Marienne in Paris? I know we're 5 frames in, but this is concerning because that was the motive we needed to know in order for this show to continue. Something tells me that the premise was canned because they know that it would have been stupid, more on that later, and that we're just gonna fill in the gaps Halo Infinite style. Although this time not in optional collectible recordings, but by flashbacks. The first episode takes place in the city of London. We're treated to an opening monologue about a story called Hell is the Absence of God. He summarizes the plot.
Neil Fisk loses the love of his life. She was good. She's in heaven. So the only way he'll feel her love again is if he goes to heaven too. But he's not exactly a guy who'd get into heaven.
The monologue ends and we're introduced to Joe teaching his students, asking for their thoughts on the premise. One student hates it, but another explains that it made some good points for a work of fantasy. After being asked what she meant by that, she says that it's barely literature, but that alone shouldn't demean its place on the syllabus as Americans write heaps of it. Joe agrees. As they continue, Joe discloses to us that the course is on American short stories in place of the Hemingway syllabus expected by the dean, as he was a last-minute hire. Hoo joy, I can't wait to see how they're gonna explain this one. He wants the first student to add to her thoughts, and she tells him that it's not really redemption if it's for his own selfish reasons. Joe takes a very slight offense to that, as they're literally talking about him, and questions if it matters if he's doing good. A third student chimes in. He says that the author isn't stating that the highest redemption is doing good, but that it's love, although love meant something deeper in the past. The first student gets big mad, saying he has no right to talk about how deep love can be, as he's never felt love, but Joe ends the argument and gives them their next assignment. The first student walks up to him to ask a question, and by this we learn that his name is Jonathan Moore. She wants to know why he keeps assigning things like Ted Chiang and not, and she quotes,
"You know, usual canonical, vaguely racist men that drink."
I think you know what you're saying.
And Joe responds, saying that the people who assigned those writers were wrong and lazy, and that this is his class. For some reason, she's impressed by that. In the next scene, Joe brings up the amount of care being put towards books in London, saying that if LA was purgatory and suburbia was hell, London might be where he finally got to the good place. He talks about Marienne and laying low before we meet our first side character, Malcolm Harding, who supposedly is a professor at this school. After being asked about the flat that's been given to him, Joe then mentions that he met Malcolm right after his job interview, and that he may have been drunk. Hold on, my contrivometer is off the charts. So Joe got a new identity that somehow has credentials for a job as a teacher. That's including but not limited to a 4-year bachelor's degree, because otherwise he wouldn't have had a shot at an interview, and Malcolm just so happened to be drunk and got schmoozed into giving Joe not only a job as a teacher, but a fully furnished apartment with books, fireplaces, and a view of his next love interest, who, you guessed it, does not like to close her curtains. So he got a teaching job and a $3,000 a week apartment gifted to him, all because he found a drunk teacher. Of course, You isn't exactly bulletproof with its writing. Even in its stronger seasons, certain cases and conditions sometimes fall through the cracks. But season 4 just tossed all realism out the window and resorted to, yeah, a murderer on the run somehow landed a high-paying job with an apartment to boot, simply because a dull teacher was drunk. We'll never show this on screen like we did with season 2, but we'll explain it later. Maybe. Just consume content. Once Joe returns to his flat, he goes on about not getting into anyone's business. Yet does so anyways because
The best way to stay out of people's business is to know what that business is.
Fascinating logic there. As a result, Joe finds out that Malcolm is an idiot teacher who went to all the right schools and got to be super rich, kinda like Benji. His girlfriend works in the art gallery business and has a spiritual mother, like Love, works super hard for what she has. Then finally, as Joe watches her having me time, we find out that Malcolm leaves her unsatisfied, like Beck. Double dipping now, aren't we? He finishes by saying that he learns how they tick so that he can avoid the circus. Kinda sounds like when you said you were going to give up on Marienne so you dialed down your stalking antics to stalking, but without souvenirs. My memory's foggy, but didn't that cause a chain reaction of events?
I killed Natalie for you! Shut up!
Oh yeah, that. As he pulls out Marienne's locket, we get the first flashback to his days in Paris. And what a coincidence! He just so happens to find a painting of Marienne's. Who would have thought? But don't worry, it gets better. He asks, who I would hope to be a translator, if they had more of their work or an email. And of course she knows exactly where she went, which in turn completely explains why Joe's in London.
Dumbass.
First things first, Marienne was shown to have common sense and reads the room quite well. In season 3, when her and Love start talking about Joe, Marienne attempts to downplay herself by telling her that she's a huge taskmaster with exacting standards. And when Love mentions how much he loves working at the bookstore, Marienne disengages by saying that she's taken and wants to spend as much time with her boyfriend as possible, which is why Joe stays late so that he can pick up her slack. She's respectful of their marriage, and while she has interacted with Joe, she made sure to stop and not go forward until Joe lies to her about him and Love getting a divorce. She's not Einstein, but she isn't an idiot either. So why in the hell did she think it was a good idea to go back to her childhood home, especially when she told Joe about it? That would be the first place anyone would look. which is why it would have been stupid to go there instead of, I don't know, literally any other place that you didn't mention to Joe. Not only did she go back to her childhood home, she went back, threw down a painting reminiscent of her art style, gave up her email, and told everyone where she was going. Joe noted that she left no trace back at the season 3 finale, meaning the only way this season could have happened is if she went to the one place she brought up to Joe in a conversation about her life as a child. Now, there could be something that explains this. Like, what if she thought he was dead? Later in this episode, in another flashback, she talks about him and his wife.
If you're standing here, then love didn't kill you. You killed her, didn't you?
Okay, I'll give you that. Maybe she thought that her art could flourish because there was no perceivable threat. So I guess that explains, wait a minute. Marienne could never think Joe was dead. When Love was talking to her about Joe for the second time in the season finale,
You and your beautiful daughter, you need to run, disappear. Marienne is just the beginning of what he's willing to do. Then why aren't you running too? It's not that simple for me.
she talked about him like he was still a threat. Otherwise, why would she tell her to disappear? As far as Marienne knows, he's not in the house. There wasn't a single thing Love said to her that implies that she murdered him. So her realizing that Joe is alive and Love is dead is her putting 2 and 2 together rather than her expectations being subverted. But what if she found out about the house fire by means of the news? That can't be true either, because if she found out that way, then so would the rest of Paris. Joe wouldn't have been able to stay as long as he did, as people would see his face when he carelessly strolls in a public area in the finale. They'd start talking, and then he'd be interrogated. Given that he didn't run off to another country in fear of the publicity, of course, both outcomes of which kills the existence of this season. And even if she did find out by the news, she would have had to find out the day after she left, because that's when the first article was posted, which means that she still went to Paris with full knowledge that Joe's still out there. This is completely out of character not only for Marienne, but for anyone who has a brain. You tell your stalker about your childhood home in sadness, you find out he's been stalking you, and in case he chases after you, you flee to your childhood home. This is why I said the premise might have been canned, because it makes no goddamn sense. The flashback ends and Joe listens in on Malcolm and Kate yelling at each other before walking to his car, but aw shit! A bunch of thieves come out of nowhere and start robbing her, so it causes Joe to swoop in and save the day. She starts calling the police, but that would put Joe in danger, so he tells her not to mention him. As Malcolm comes over to thank him, Joe says that he feels bad for those that are desperate enough to steal, which causes Malcolm to go on a rant about how they're just scummy poor people targeting the rich because the rich built this country, while Joe then takes digs at how privileged he is, because rich people bad or something like that. His friend just opened up a bar and he wants to pay back Joe for helping Kate, so he brings him along to a party requiring a £25,000 membership subscription, yet Joe somehow can just waltz right in, where he meets the rest of the side characters for this season. They're quite forgettable because they introduce so many, yet they barely get any screen time, so to tell you in advance, I have little nicknames for them to keep me from getting confused when they're mentioned. First, we get introduced to Instathot. No, really, that's all she is. She's famous on Instagram, and she's nice too, I think. After we get some riveting commentary about how evil the rich are, the next side character, Email Scammer, is brought to us. She's a Nigerian princess that also invests in NFTs. That's pretty much all she is too. Next is Crypto. His dad is rich and he does art.
I have too many friends. I'm back when one is dead.
Wow. Okay, that's actually a badass quote. Oh, and he has a sister too. Also in Instathot, but she went to college, so we'll call her Instathot with a degree. Next up is Pretzel Man. His name is Rolled, but he's so rich he's got gold. So what do you get when you mix rolled and gold? Rolled gold, but what's rolled gold, you ask? It's pretzels, man. He sells boats and he owns a knife collection. Plot Device is super woke, and finally Guy is a crazy horse tamer. Why is her name Plot Device and his name Guy? For her, you'll have to wait, and for him, I came up with his name using the exact type of work effort that the writers used for him as a character.
Lousy!
Oh wait, we have one more. This is the only character that got teased by the official U Twitter account, and when I saw this, I immediately assumed that he was just a 40 clone, which was partially why my expectations for this season were low. I dare you to read this and tell me that this isn't 40. In You Season 4, Gage plays Adam, the warm, funny, and hard-partying son of a wealthy family who's famous for failing to meet their standards, but the one thing he did learn from his parents is to do whatever it takes to get what you want. Since Adam is 40 but this time half-assed, we're gonna call him 20. 20 is Instathot's boyfriend, is only rich because of his dad, and has a terrible gambling issue as Instathot tells us that he lost his flat over a shoe size. Malcolm then gives Joe drugs, Joe tosses it aside, and we meet Rhys Montrose, the author of a book the first student gave Joe, which is a memoir about how he was raised from poverty with an unstable single mom, found out on a whim that he was the son of a duke, and rose to where he is now. Did any of that story sound familiar to you? Good, because it should. and if not, just keep it tucked in your mind. It'll be important later, I promise. He mentions how abrupt the fame is and how intruding it can be, as everyone notices every shame. Joe tells him that he didn't find his books sordid, and Rhys replies saying,
"Fellow man with a shit childhood then?"
Joe responds without responding, Rhys gives him a toast, and we get some more riveting commentary about how evil the rich are before he leaves to go to a morning show. Upon getting up, Joe finds out that he's a lot drunker than he thought, and you know what happens after? He drinks some more, and this time it's hallucinogenic. Then we get some oddly specific questions.
Why are you here?
Did you kill someone? I can always tell. My cousin killed someone. Accident, of course. It was just a homeless person, which, God, if she did it now, she'd be cancelled.
That doesn't make any sense. It's funny because it's unexpected.
You cannot awkwardly shove in a line as awkwardly as that. It just didn't fit. First, she asks something that hit a bit too close to home, and then she goes on about her cousin killing someone on accident, and if it was done now, she'd be canceled? What the hell am I listening to? Can someone help me? Am I too old for this type of comedy? Then Instathot asks if a woman broke his heart? What are the odds that they would ask him these kinds of questions? No, let me rephrase. What are the odds that they would ask him these kinds of questions when he's on drugs? It's just out of nowhere and in your face, like they're breaking their necks to repeat what happened in season 2 as a means to muster up some kind of fake tension because we need to get the plot moving. It's not like they rushed in 11 characters hungry for development. We need conflict now, so we gotta go. Then we get another flashback. Not too much happens here. Marienne just sees Joe and runs away. Back in the present, Malcolm also joined the League of Super Contrived Questions that have no business being asked, asking if Joe let her go or if she got away. Joel told him about his adventure in Paris. Malcolm tells him that she wasn't the one. Joe says that they were perfect and that love told her things. Then Malcolm goes on another forced rant saying that women are cheaters too, but in the most hitting it over your head way possible. But Joe says that she wasn't like that. Malcolm calls him a simp and continues his miso soup rant, which is fueling Joe's fire. Literally after he says,
"If I could move, I'd kill this guy."
Do you know what he does? He drinks some more hallucinogens. Now we're on a trippy montage, whoa, before it cuts to the next day. Joe gets up, grabs himself a cup of coffee, and basks in the new day, hoping everything will just die down. You guys remember what happened in season 2? When 40 drops LSD in Joe's drink, and he had to find out if he was the one who killed Delilah or not? Nah, he doesn't either. He's not careful. He doesn't care what being drunk or high will do to him. He'll just drink the night away and have absolutely no regard for past occurrences. Nothing matters without Marienne, so let me just drink some hardcore spirits so that I can risk killing someone. Oh shit, I actually did it. As he gets to work on disposing the body, the police show up at Kate's house. They're looking straight at him. So he sonic speeds his way to the garage. Quite lucky how he didn't run across a single person on his way down, and he drives off.
The classics professor did tell me I could use his car in an emergency.
Quite lucky how one of the professors just let anyone borrow their car to get rid of the body, as we're given a continuation of the flashback from before. He runs after Marienne, disarms her, and they catch up on what happened at the end of season 3. She pleads, hoping that there weren't more before love. He responds without responding again, then she calls him a murderer. He says that she's wrong and that'll let her go to prove it, and he does. Back in the present, he shreds the body and bleach clean the tools. In less than 45 minutes, under no surveillance, with not a single camera in sight, and we go back to the past. Now some hitman hired by the Quinns to kill Love's murderer finds Joe and doesn't want to kill him because he's tired of hurting people? What are the odds that a hitman we've never seen in any season prior to this one, whose only job is to kill people, just all of a sudden got tired of doing his job when he got to Joe? And not only that, hands him a whole new identity with all of these credentials, and they expect us to pass it off like everything's all good and explained? Does anyone understand how lucky this is? The one hitman that's been doing jobs like this under the Quinns for a long time didn't feel like doing the job that just so happened to be on our main character, a main character of which killed the daughter of the person who hired him, while at the same time gifting the main character physical plot armor? Are you out of your fucking mind? I already had it up to here with Joe finding Marienne, but this is on another level. If this situation was the slightest bit realistic, pop! Joe's dead, mission's complete, show's over, time to go home. But here, the hired assassin is nothing but a last-minute shoved-in get-out-of-jail-free card because there was no other way the writers could get Joe out of this predicament, since Marienne can just dial 911 and his goose, or roast chicken if you will, is cooked. Once again, killing any reason for this story to continue. It's almost like this show never needed another season. The hitman tells Joe that if he hands him the money he took from Love's account and kills Marienne, as she's a liability, he can clear Joe's past and live on as Jonathan Moore. Back in the present, he disposes of the body, meets Rhys again, and talks about his memoir. Joe quotes from the book,
"Heartbreak is always the catalyst for a new path,"
implying that he wants to be on a new path after Marienne broke his heart, but he messed up, so he looks to Rhys for advice. Rhys then dives into Joe's life and proceeds to convey that Joe had a hellish life that left him damaged, which makes him capable of dealing damage. He also tells him that since he can't erase his past, he tries to do some good to move forward, including protecting the people that he loves. Joe asks if redemption is possible. Rhys answers yes, but only if they commit to facing their past no matter what. Rhys leaves and we get another flashback. This time Joe steals Marienne's necklace, lets her go, and sends a picture to Elliot proving that he killed her. The flashback ends and he bumps into Kate. After questioning Joe on Malcolm's whereabouts, to which he replies saying that he doesn't know, she invites him to dinner, but he declines as he has papers to grade. Then she gets the big mad, commenting on Americans and their fetish for work, as people in England have dinner. A little inconsiderate, don't you think? There's also constant hinting at Joe saying something to Instathot when he was high, so you'll probably want to keep that in mind. I'm sure it'll go somewhere integral to the story. She continues talking about how trust is earned and that Joe is suspect for sniffing around her friends. Then she finishes by saying that she hugely, and I said hugely, prefers that Joe thinks she's a bitch.
Okay.
She says for him to come or else she'll make sure that Phoebe cries in front of paparazzi, blaming her sadness on him. He says that he'd love to come, and she says,
Love had escalated quickly.
What do you want?
It's not that simple.
What do you want? Damn it, what do you want?
She also tells him that they're even because he kept his presence under wraps from the police, and they both walk off. Joe arrives at the dinner, and a suspicious number texts him talking about how well he handled Malcolm. Because of this, they want to find out who he is. So now we know that it's a frame job. He sits among who might be the stalker, and the credits roll. Episode 2 continues with the dinner from before, and Joe becomes paranoid with the thought that his past could be revealed by whoever is at this table. Rhys asks if he's okay, and Joe tells him that he's fine, but 20 was confused with Joe's utterance, which quiets the room. Yes, this part is important, and I'm sure you film theorists all know why, but hey! All eyes are on Joe, but Instathot cuts the tension by calling for a toast. The toast goes out to Crypto, and Joe returns home. What's this? An envelope gets pushed under his door. It's an anonymous invitation. He pieces it all together and finds out that he's in a whodunit, what he would like to call, and I quote, the lowest form of literature. Hey guys, we can't write a whodunit to save our lives, so let's make fun of it and call it bad so that people think we're self-aware. After seeing this invite, he searches his flat for any hidden cameras or mics. He also tries to retrace his steps, looking for a moment when the stalker installed Evanescence on his phone.
This is why I don't drink.
But you did anyways. Why? Because we needed a 4th season, that's why. He scans the QR code and finds out that it's an invitation to Crypto's art show. After coincidentally overhearing a call from Kate, he then takes a trip to the library with more comments about how terrible whodunits are.
I always thought they were word search puzzles for adults. Circle the clues, win a game, not exactly art.
I've never heard such a pseudo-intellectual statement in my life, and this may just be me, but Joe wouldn't say something like this. So what? Books can't be fun for people to read anymore? I'm not the biggest book reader, but I'm sure it's common knowledge that whodunits are a more enjoyable form of literature. You gather up all the pieces and you find out who the suspect is. If you're wrong, you can go back and see what you missed. It's all for the experience. Shit, there's even a board game for it, and I loved playing it as a kid. What's wrong with the reader feeling like a detective trying to crack a case? This is so out of character for Joe, it's almost surreal. One of his best traits is his irrational love for books. He always had a specific story to pull up for every situation, be it his or someone he cares for. Paco is the biggest example. The way his eyes would light up and the warmth he'd bring to the screen whenever books were a topic were a huge part of what made him so hard to root against.
I'm an old-fashioned guy. I like real life. I know I'm in a city full of people with big, fat, neon sign aspirations, but I love books, and I want my life to be about what I actually love.
It would always be so interesting to listen to, and that's coming from someone who could never get into books, because I'd be 5 paragraphs in, always dumbfounded by not getting to the bottom of the page, because I'd be 5 paragraphs in, always dumbfounded. See what I mean? This aggression against whodunits is more like a self-insert or grasp at self-awareness rather than a thought from Joe because it's contradictory to his love for books. Sure, whodunits have never been brought up, so he's never had a chance to express his disdain towards them. Although if he needed to, then I'm sure the best time to bring it up would have been during episode 9 of season 2, as that episode is the closest thing to a whodunit the show has tried. But casting out an entire genre simply for the idea that if it's fun and not thought-provoking or deep, it's not art, makes Joe out to be a literary elitist, looking down on all of those inferior to him. You know, the one thing this show tries to use to antagonize the big bad rich kids, which also conflicts with his upbringing as a poor child raised in a broken home, bringing a max damage combo to his character. One more thing before we move on. Remember when he was supposed to be teaching a course? It's been about 2 days and he hasn't been doing his job. Sure, he was at a party, it might have been on the weekend, but we don't get another classroom scene until episode 3. So either the UK has much longer weekends, or this show has completely lost track of time. The first student, now known as Nadia, is wondering if the books he's reading are going to be a part of the course. He tells her that they're just a personal project, to her disappointment because what do you know, she loves Whodunits. He thinks they're formulaic, but she tells him that while there is a formula, the formula itself is fun, because it draws you in. She also thinks Joe's problem is that mysteries are entertaining. He wants her to elaborate, so she asks him.
Because who doesn't have to be entertaining? White, male, geniuses. Yeah.
I think you know what you're saying.
She continues by saying that being a snooze is some indicator of high art, pretty much calling him a snob. Whoops, pardon my mansplaining, I mean a tad patriarchal. He wants some advice on how to understand Whodunits, and she tells him about the tropes.
Number 1, there are no coincidences. 2, all motives always boil down to sex, money, or revenge. And 3, the first suspect is usually the second victim.
Joe stops her and tells her to narrow it down to a single murder and a frame job. Then she tells him that it's all about why the victim was murdered, as they wanted them dead enough to plan it. He thanks Nadia, reviews the first trope, and somehow draws the conclusion that the killer is Elliot. Did you somehow forget that his one job was to kill you? Why would he go through all that trouble to— You know what? Never mind. I'm not gonna waste time trying to break this down because I'm starting to get a headache from how stupid this accusation is. Elliot hilariously dismisses his theory, and now Joe is back to square one. Shocker. The mystery stalker teases Joe by calling out his wardrobe and mannerisms in real time. In response, he frantically starts turning around like he has been doing the same thing for 3 seasons. Again, out of character, as when it comes to verbal sparring or even the disposal of dead bodies, he was always calm. In season 1, when Peach's PI told him that he saw him go into Beck's house and that a urine sample was being tested, he didn't budge. Yes, granted he didn't give out the greatest covers, but he showed no signs of fear, just being his usual charismatic self. Candace's appearance in season 2 is a good example of this as well. Yet in season 4, when he's being stalked, he's terrified. This is literally Joe's playing field and he's losing on all counts. The stalker already dissected his weak spots and they know that he's under a fake alias, but Joe doesn't fight back in any way. He just accepts that he got bodied and walks away. Now the show forced this whodunit into a game of cat and mouse because— plot? Instathot invited Joe somewhere because he said something to her at the party, but he hears screaming. He rushes to her aid, statue in hand, only to find out that it's just a laser hair removal appointment. She brings up her conversation with Joe at the party and claims that's what brought them together to be friends. We learn that she was the one who sent the invite, so Joe looks at this as an opportunity to silently interrogate. He references Malcolm and observes their demeanor towards him. Both were cold and dismissive after hearing his name. So to divert the conversation, they both ask about his outfit. 20 AirPod checks his attire and sends him to find a suit with Guardman.
How much does a Tom suit tend to cost?
Because I definitely don't have it.
How does he— the apartment— he hasn't been— I think I'm gonna be sick. After we get even more riveting commentary about how evil the rich are, he sees Kate hard at work, mentioning that she's the only one in the group that ever works. I wonder why that is. He tells Instathot with a degree, Guy, and Crypto that Instathot sent him, and the way they react is somewhat significant for Joe. Joe tries the Malcolm tactic again, which causes Crypto to make fun of him while the rest of the group laughs, telling Joe that everyone hates Malcolm. Once again, back to square one. Kate gives more snarky remarks before he makes observations about how stressed she is having to deal with people who can't fail, because rich people bad, or something like that. Then he makes moves to her office, again somehow not passing a single person, to get Malcolm's key— Mother of God, that thing is huge! There's no way she wouldn't notice that it's gone. He had to get here by car, so she definitely noticed, because there's no way he'd be able to get the keys back to her before then. And what do you know, we never see him do it. Go figure. He starts searching the area looking for reasons why anyone would want to kill Malcolm, and he finds a bet book. I guess that one abrupt comment from Guy helped.
Twatty big dick owes me 60 quid. You into betting horses, Professor?
Gotta give him just enough presents to make them look useful as to give the illusion that they have a place in the story, other than being filler to add to the pool of suspects. What animal would do such a thing? Also, no gloves? The man is quite rich with a heritage of wealth. Would be a shame if somebody from his family hired a PI to investigate his office. He walks out with the book and some money, but whoops! Nadia stumbles upon him sneaking out of Malcolm's office. He then explains himself saying that he was getting Kate's wallet, to Nadia's disappointment yet again, as she hoped he was breaking in. Anyone else getting Ani vibes from her? Why is it that every time she's on the screen, she's caught up with the events that transpired in the show? First Rhys Montrose, then Whodunits, and now this joke? I get you guys needed an Ellie substitute, but at least let her intelligence be earned instead of being coincidental.
Tell me you're not having your detective generically muck about for a motive.
Wait, what the?
Well, I thought that's how you...
No, that's what, not how. How is what makes the story cool. So your detective's got to be special in some way, a superpower, deduction, or no, in science or whatever. Oh my god, your face. I've really just helped you, haven't I?
And that's what gets him to go back to Stalker Joe? Huh? Are you Raven Simone? Can you see the few? Oh, I see what they're trying to do here. With newfound confidence, he's on his way to stalk the group. Wait, aren't you being stalked? What if the person stalking you is stalking you right now? Could you imagine how much trouble you'd be in if they snapped pictures of you sneaking around Malcolm's friends? You've gotten caught multiple times in the past, even by people who didn't suspect that they were being stalked in the first place. What makes you think that an unseen enemy that knows your game wouldn't see you? Is this the same Joe from the previous seasons? Did he take up a new personality to stay consistent with the new identity given to him by Elliot? Let's think about this for a second. He's not meticulous in any way, shape, or form, when that literally is his strongest character trait, as it's the only reason he hasn't gotten caught yet. He gets put into a wave of anxiety when he finds out he's being stalked, plays back into the meticulous part, considering he has home court advantage as he himself is also a stalker and has dealt with many a stalker in the past, be it legally and or vengefully. Why would he visibly freak out over this? Imagine if it was a PI or Elliot like he stupidly thought. I'd get it if he was losing it in his narration, but physically freaking out gives him away, which wholly goes against how careful he usually is. He has no detective skills. While I can give him a slight pass because of who the stalker is, it still doesn't excuse how he can't hold a candle to the way he was back when he was looking for Peach's password in season 1 and when he was retracing his steps in season 2. Only thing he does now is ask 1 or 2 questions about Malcolm to people he just met in hopes that someone would give themselves away at the sheer thought of his name.
Please confess so I can get back to my life.
Then when that plan inevitably fails, the plot forces him to leave before he gets any further in his investigation. And finally, if his initial ideas don't work, instead of regrouping for another angle of attack, he needs Nadia to tell him what to do in order to forward the plot, because if not for her, he'd be stuck in limbo looking like a deer in headlights. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that this is what they call character regression. With how bleak his character is looking an episode and a half in, I hope to God we don't get to the assassination stage. He rules out plot device because she's a moron, and he rules out email scammer because she thinks we're living in a simulation and lives a life of safety. 20 once acted as the Sun King in a play, and Joe found that name in Malcolm's bet book, indicating that he owes 20. So Joe follows him into a back room where he discovers, how do I put this? 20 getting rained on by one of the waiters. Yep, okay, moving on. Guardman catches him in the act, and Joe weasels his way out by telling him that he's a writer doing research for a book about the inequality between the rich and poor. He inspects the bet book, and Joe tells him that it's for his thoughts. In place of reading it himself and acknowledging that what he said was hogwash, he instead takes his word for it, pockets his lunch money, and lets him off. It's the day of Crypto's art show. In order to dodge the cameras, good to see that he learned something from the previous seasons, he sneaks over to the back door and luckily finds a woman who just so happens to know the back door's code. How convenient. He looks for 20 as his gripes with Malcolm fit all 3 motives into one, but on his way he bumps into Kate again, giving her a compliment on her work to break the ice. After she gives him another snarky remark, we finally meet Pretzel Man. They start having a little chat about which coast Joe is from. Joe says a bit of both, and Pretzel Man says that he assumed that he was a bit of a California boy. Joe gets the big mad, but 20 passes by, so the interrogation commences. And he gets nowhere. No, honestly, nothing of worth was said in this conversation other than 20 mentioning that Malcolm is a blackmailer. Joe then walks up to one of the exhibits, the Hello You theme starts playing, and he starts crying for some reason. I don't understand the subtext, but that's okay because Rhys interrupts the moment anyways. We get, wait for it, even more riveting commentary about how evil the rich are before Joe asks in a small fit of rage,
"Why are you friends with these people?"
Rhys is a bit confused, but Joe explains that it goes against what he stands for. So Rhys tells him about how kind his college friends were to him when he needed them. Joe asks if they still are, but Rhys responds by saying that it would be hypocritical of him to disavow old friends who live their lives being who they are, and that the longer you know someone, the more cursed you are to see them as human, using Pretzel Man as an example. Before he can continue his thoughts, some random woman tosses paint on Crypto's art and demands him to tell his crowd that he's a fake. She gets escorted out by Guardman, and Crypto tosses the rest of the painting onto his art as if it was a part of the show, and everyone applauds. Crypto gets the big mad and looks to fire Kate if she doesn't keep the random woman quiet, then goes to party. Joe tells Kate that what a coincidence! The random woman that tossed the paint on Crypto's art is actually the woman he happened to come across when he was making his way to the back door. But not only that, Joe caught wind of a card on her bag that displayed her exact location and had it retained in his mind in the literal 3 seconds it took for her to open the door. Who would have thought? With this, they make their way to her home to find out why she ruined Crypto's art. After bribing her, she informs us on when she used to be Crypto's assistant. She actually painted the cats herself, but Crypto took all of the credit as every artist's apprentice pays their dues. She also tells him that he used to leave drugs lying around in case they got stressed so that he could pass them off as junkies. Finally, we found out that the cat is her grandma's and its name is Isis. Joe notes that Isis was in the book. After obtaining this information, Kate writes her a check to compensate for her loss and walks out. Joe asks her about how much Malcolm was going to give her, but she reveals to us that Malcolm came to let her know that he was going to expose Crypto. Joe starts to piece it together again, so he hurries to Kate to tell her about Crypto. But before he can clarify his accusation, she snarky remarks him by calling him sanctimonious and a grift, and drives off. Joe somehow walked all the way back with the party still going strong to take a seat while waiting for Crypto to leave so that he can investigate him. But he falls asleep, Crypto dies, the police arrive, and Joe wakes up to new texts and a dead body. What do you know, Nadia's intelligence strikes again. It's almost like they're using her clairvoyance as a means to say that she's the orchestrator behind the serial murders. The next day, Joe arrives at the aftershock of the murder. Everyone but the two Instathots just shrug it off and make light of it, mostly referring to how ignorant Crypto was and how much money Kate is going to make now that he's dead. Upon hearing this, Rhys walks out to get some air, and Joe follows. Rhys wants to know what Joe's reaction was to Crypto's death. Joe says shock, and then asks Rhys the same. Rhys replies with the opposite. He informs us of Crypto's past behavior, constantly using people, including Blue, as a footstool. He also hoped that he would have changed to be a better person, which makes him upset that he's gone. In the next scene, Joe crosses paths with Kate on a coincidental phone call yet again. And by listening in, he finds out that she's helping Blue. How does she not notice him here? I have no idea, but he ponders on why she's trying to hide that she's a good person. He returns to the library to read Agatha Christie, only to be greeted by Nadia proving her clairvoyance for a third time this episode.
So come clean. You really writing a book?
Must she always be this smart?
Give it a minute.
Only because sometimes I find that people say that they're writing a book for vanity.
Coincidental. She mentions that Malcolm volunteered to read her pages, but due to an appointment with death, he left her hanging. As she continues talking about it, she gets more and more saddened by his disappearance. Joe looks at this, assumes that there might have been something more between her and Malcolm, and offers to read her pages. She declines because she thinks his taste is suspect, but nevertheless she fills us in on her story's genre. It's a mystery with mythological creatures, so she teases him, wondering if he can be that entertained. He happily replies, demanding that she brings him unicorns. Finally, she rolls out, leaving Joe with his thoughts on how much good in his life as a teacher was taken away by his stalker. He goes back to his flat to plan his next move against the stalker, but aw shit! The stalker uncovers Joe's secrets, infiltrated his flat, and put up a wall of every single major occurrence that took place in the previous seasons. And the credits roll.
Well, I'm glad that's over.
Where to begin with this recap? We went through just 2 episodes and already this season has run out of steam. The plot itself is standing on shaky ground due to the amount of inconsistencies littered all throughout these 2 episodes alone. Joe's character being in tatters, Marienne's stupidity, Malcolm's gifting attitude when he's drunk, Nadia's clairvoyance, Kate's inability to close curtains, the surrounding cast sans Kate and Rhys being both one note and close to absent from the story, the lack of PIs and police involvement despite the wealth of the victims, the lack of cameras or even people where both should be present, which is laughable considering the season that came before this, certain coincidental or unexplained actions alluding to contrivances and plot holes, like Joe constantly reminding us of his money problems, yet even post Malcolm he lives comfortably in a Kensington flat and can waltz into a bar that requires a £25,000 membership with ease, the thieves robbing Kate on the one day Joe happens to be going in her direction, Joe heavily drinking and taking drugs when he knows he shouldn't have, the cops not seeing Joe from across the way with blood on his gloves and apron, Joe walking out of his flat carrying a bloodied human-sized rug to the garage unseen, shredding a body, stuffing the parts into bags, and then bleach cleaning the area in less than 45 minutes under no surveillance of any kind, Marienne not calling the police smack after seeing Joe, Elliot's convenient reluctance to finish the job while also handing his target a new life with god-tier credentials, Joe getting away with swiping Malcolm's key without Kate noticing despite the fact that he has to walk a car's distance to get to Malcolm's office and back.
See you back at the car.
Which goes double for when Kate leaves Joe with Blue, yet he walks back again with the party still going strong. Speaking of Blue, when he made his way around back to dodge the cameras, he somehow happened upon a woman that not only just knew the code to the back door, but in the minute amount of time he had to look at the tiny card on her bag that just so happened to display her place of residence, it became so burned into his mind that he remembers it instantly minutes later when we find out that she had something to do with crypto. And what's more, I may be getting ahead of myself here, she entered the plot just in time so that Joe can use her as an asset to corroborate his defense, keeping the detectives off of his trail the following day. Isn't he supposed to be teaching? If just one of these things fell out of place or never happened, there would be no story as the plot would falter at the slightest change of events. The funniest part is that there are many more issues that we haven't even begun to touch, but the bad news is that they can't be addressed until the twist in episode 7 is a present topic, with even more being withheld until their sorry excuse for an explanation in season 8 gets held under the microscope as well. So you'll have to wait a bit, but I promise you, we will get to as many issues dug up by the twist as possible. Almost like a little mystery for us as the viewers to solve. Even with all of these holes in the boat that is You Season 4, this is only the beginning. So you can rest now, recharge your thinking caps, and stretch your suspensions as far as you can, because we're gonna kick off the next part with Joe and Kate's empty love chase through London. Not only that, but we're also gonna cover the obligatory all the suspects together under one roof segment of this whodunit experience, rounding off the first part of this season with an unholy trilogy of aimless filler. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, you all have an amazing, spectacular rest of your day. Goodbye, for now.